Good day, everyone. Welcome to G Class 101, still in collaboration with Miss Shai. Now, today, good day to all of you, to all the listeners, and to all who are watching this video right now. Now, we're going to discuss self as cognitive construct. This is another lesson for our understanding the self subject. So in this lesson, we are going to identify the different ideas in psychology about the self. You can create your own definition of the self based on the definitions from psychology, and we are going to analyze the effects of various factors identified in psychology in the formation of the self. So, as what we have discussed in our previous videos, in every field of study, there are they have their own research, their definition and conceptualization of self and identity. Some are similar, while some specific only in their field. And each field also has thousands of research on self and identity as well as related or synonymous terms. Now, the trend of lessons also seems to define the concept of the self from a larger context. Example, we have culture and society down to the individual. However, it must be pointed out that modern researchers acknowledge the contributions of each field, and this is not some sort of nurture versus nature, society or culture versus individual and brain, and other social sciences versus psychology debate. No, it's not that. Psychology may focus on the individual and the cognitive functions, but it does not discount the context and other possible factors that affect the individual. For students who take up psychology, discussions on theories and development, among others, actually take at least one semester, and there are still more to be learned about the concept of self. So, in this lesson, it will provide you an overview of the themes of psychology regarding the said concept. So, in confidence or in an attempt to avoid further analytical discussions, a lot of people would probably say, I am who I am. Yet, this statement still begs the question, if you are who you are, then who are you that makes you who you are? This is as mentioned earlier, there are various of definitions of the self and other similar or interchangeable concepts in psychology. But simply put, self is the sense of personal identity and who we are as individuals. Well, according to William James, as one of the earliest psychologists to study the self and conceptualize the self as having two concepts, the I and me. The I is the thinking, acting, and feeling self, and while the me, on the other hand, is the physical characteristics as well as the psychological capabilities that makes you who you are. Then we also have here another proponent. According to Carl Roger, in his theory of personality, he also used the same terms. The I as one who acts and decides, while the me is what you think or feel about yourself as an object. Well, other concepts similar to self are identity and self concept. Identity is composed of personal characteristics, social roles and responsibilities, as well as affiliations that define who one is. While self concept is what basically comes into your mind when you are asked about yourself or about who you are. So those are self-concept. Well, self-identity and self-concept are not fixed in one time frame. For example, when you are asked about who you are, you can say, I was a varsity player in 5th grade, which pertains to the past, a college student, which may be the present, and a future politician, which is the future. They are not also fixed for life, nor are they are ever changing at every moment. So think of a malleable metal, strong and hard, but can be bent and molded in other shapes. Think about water. It can take any shape of the container, but at its core, it is still the same element. Well, Carl Roger has captured the idea of his concept of the self-schema, no, or our organized system or collection of knowledge about who we are. So the schema is not limited to the example that I have stated. It may also include your interest, work, course, age, name, and physical characteristics, among others. So as you grow and adapt to the changes around you, they also change. But they are not passive receivers. They actively shape and affect how you see, think, and feel about things. So for example, when someone states your first name, even if they are not talking about you, your attention is drawn to them. So if you have a provincial language and you hear someone using it, it catches your attention. If you consider yourself a book lover, and a bookstore may always entice you out of all the other stores in a mall. So theorists generally see the self and identity as mental constructs. So they are created and recreated in memory. But there are also current researchers who pointed out to the frontal lobe of the brain as the specific area in the brain associated with the process concerning the self. So there are several psychologists who, especially during the field's earlier development, follow this trend of thought. So they are looking deeper into the mind of the person to theorize about the self, identity, self-concept, and in turn, the one's personality. So the most influential of them is, I know that every one of you knows him, and he is Simon Freud, or others may pronounce it in other way, but I am most preferable in Simon Freud. Well, basically, Freud saw the self, its mental processes, and one's behavior as the results of the interaction between the id, the ego, and the superego, right? And however, as mentioned earlier, one cannot fully discount the effects of society and culture on the formation of the self, identity, and self-concept. Even as Freud and other theorists and researchers try to understand the person by digging deeper into the mind, they cannot fully discount the huge and important effects of the environment. As the above mentioned, definitions of the self, social interaction always has a part to play in who we think we are. So this is not nature versus nurture, but instead nature and nurture perspective. Now, under the theory of symbolic interactionism by G.H. Mead, he argued that the self is created and developed through human interaction. So basically, there are three reasons why self and identity are social products. First, we have here, we do not create our lives out of nothing. So society helped in creating the foundations of who we are, and even if we make our choices, we will still operate in our social and historical context in one way or the other. So you may of course transfer from one culture to another, but parts of you were still or will still affect you, and you will also have to adapt to the new social context. So try looking at your definition of who you are and see where society had affected you. Second, whether we like to admit it or not, we actually need others to affirm and reinforce who we think we are. We also need them as reference to point about our identity. And one interesting example is these social media interactions we have. So, in case of Facebook, there are those who will consciously or unconsciously try to garner more likes and or positive reactions and then that can and will their self-concept. And it is almost like a battle between who got more friends, more views, and it's almost more trending topics. So if one says he is a good singer, but his performance and the evaluation of his audience says otherwise, that will have an effect on that person's idea of himself in one way or another. So number three, what we think is important to us. We also have been influenced by what is important in our social or historical context. So education might be an important thing to your self-concept because you grew up in a family that valued education, and money might be important to some because they have grown in a low-income family and realized how important money in addressing certain needs like medical emergencies. Well, being a nurse or a lawyer can be a priority in your self-schema because it is the in-demand course during your time. Now, social interaction. So, as you can see to those three reasons, social interaction and group affiliation, therefore, are vital factors in creating our self concept, especially in the aspect of providing us with our social identity or our perception of who we are based on our membership to certain groups. It is also inevitable that we can have several social identities, that those identities can overlap, and that we automatically play the roles as we interact with our groups. For example, you are a student who is also part of a certain group of friends. You study because it is your role as a student, but prefer to study with your friends, and your study pattern changes when you are with your friends and when you do it alone. So there are times, however, when we are aware of our self-concepts. So this is also called as self-awareness, no? Carver and Scheer identify the two types of self that we can be aware of. First is the private self or your internal standards and private thoughts and feelings, and the public self or your public image, commonly geared toward having a good presentation of yourself to others. Now, self-awareness also presents with at least three other self-schema. We have the actual, ideal, and all-self. The actual self is who you are at the moment. The ideal self is who you like to be. The all-self is who you think you should be. So, example is that you are a student interested in basketball, but is also academically challenged in most of your subject. Your ideal self might be to practice more and play with the varsity team, but ought to pass your subjects as a responsible student. One has to find a solution to such discrepancies to avoid agitation, dejection, or other negative emotions. So in some instances, however, all three may be in line with one another. Now, self-awareness may be positive or negative depending on the circumstances and our next course of action. Self-awareness can be or can keep you from doing something dangerous. It can help remind you that there is an exam tomorrow in one of your subjects when you are about to spend time playing computer games with your cousins. So among others, in other instances, self-awareness can be too much that we are concerned about being observed and criticized by others, also known as self-consciousness. So at other times, especially with large crowds, we may experience the what we call this, the individuation or the loss of individual self-awareness and individual accountability in groups. A lot of people will attune themselves with the emotions of their group, and because the large crowd also provides some kind of anonymity, we may lessen our self-control and act in ways that we will not do when we are alone. A common example is a mass demonstration erupting in a riot. Now, our group identity and self-awareness also has a great impact on our self-esteem. One of the common concepts associated with the self is it is defined as our own positive or negative perception or evaluation of ourselves. And one of the ways which our social relationship affects our self-esteem is through social comparison. According to the social comparison theory, we learn about ourselves, the appropriateness of our behaviors, as well as our social status by comparing aspects of ourselves with other people. So we have here two types of social comparison. We have the downward social comparison, which is the more common type of comparing ourselves with others. As the name implies, we create a positive self-concept by comparing ourselves with those who are worse off than us. And by having the advantage, we can raise our self-esteem. And another is the upward social comparison, which is comparing ourselves with those who are better off than us. While it can be a form of motivation for some, a lot of those who do this actually felt lower self-esteem as they highlight more of their weakness or inequalities. Take note that this occurs not only between individuals but also among groups. Thus, if a person's group is performing better and is acknowledged more than the other group, then his self-esteem will also be heightened. So social comparison also entails what is called self-evaluation maintenance theory. What is this theory all about? This theory stated that we can feel threatened when someone outperforms us, especially when that person is close to us. Now, in this case, we usually react in three ways. First, we distance ourselves from the person or redefine our relationship with them. Some will resort to the silent treatment, change of friends, while some may also redefine by being closer to that person, hoping that some association may give him a certain kind of acknowledgement. Also that also. Now, second, we may also reconsider the importance of the aspect or skill in which you were outperformed. If you got beaten in a drawing hobby where you could excel in a drawing competition. Now, you might think that drawing is not really for you, and you will find it a hobby where you could excel, thus preserving your self-esteem. Now, lastly, we may also strengthen our resolve to improve that certain aspect of ourselves. Instead of quitting drawing, you might join seminars, practice more often, read books about it, and add some elements in your drawing that makes it unique among others. And achieving your goal through hard work will increase your self-esteem too. But among those three reactions that a person would do, probably ang ginagawa ng mga tao or kadalasan nire-react ng mga tao is itong pinakauna. Kasi kapag na-feel mo na pinapagalitan ka, kinokorek ka, so parang nilalayo mo ang sarili mo. Kasi hindi lahat ng tao nakaka-accept ng kanyang kamalian kasi hindi lahat ng tao nag-evaluate, no? Or kung sa Bisaya pa, dili ta ng tao maghinuklog sa iyang mga binuhatan. So, there are only few people who can absorb the last action, no? Or last reaction when there is that certain situation. Okay. However, in the attempt to increase or maintain your self-esteem, meron din iba, they become narcissistic. Ano ba itong narcissistic? So, narcissistic, this is a trait characterized by overly high self-esteem or kung tinatawag ninyo na hambugon. No? Sobra naka-proud sa iya ng self-admiration, and self-centeredness. They are often charismatic because of how they take care of their image. Kita gid niyo nga ihagid nang ibaligya yang kaugalingon, di ba? May ganon. Okay. Now, Taking care of that image includes their interpersonal relationship. Thus, they will try to look for a better partners, better acquaintances, as well as people who will appreciate them a lot. So this makes them a bad romantic partner or friend since they engage in relationships only to serve themselves. So sometimes there is a thin line between high self-esteem and narcissism. So, para malaman natin kung ano yung kaibahan na ay, na-boost ko yung self-esteem ko without being narcissistic. So, there are a lot of tests and measurements for self-esteem, like the Rosenberg scale. But the issue is that the result can be affected by the desire of the person to portray herself in a positive or advantageous way. In case you want to take a test and find a numerical value or level of your self-esteem, you try to be honest and objective about what you feel and see about yourself. Although self-esteem is very important class, no? It is a very important concept related to the self. Studies have shown that it only has a correlation, not causality, not to positive outputs and outlook. It can be argued that high or healthy self-esteem may result to an overall good personality, but it is not, no? And should not be. Because the only source of person's healthy perspective is of herself. Okay, people with high self-esteem are commonly described as outgoing. So outgoing sila, they are very adventurous and adaptable in a lot of circumstances or situations. They also initiate activities, building relationship with people. However, they may also dismiss other activities that do not conform to their self-concept or cannot boost their self-esteem. They may also be bullies and experiment on abusive behaviors with drugs, alcohol, and sex. But take note, class, kung wala kay, natawag na to nga dili kayo, boost to nga self-esteem, no? Ang makatabang lang yun sa ato is ang atong kaugalingon. No? Katong sulti ka ganina nga comparing yourself to others. So, dili kaya nato siya i-focus ng kinahanglan, ikumpara nato atong kaugalingon sa uban because you are unique and maybe your path is not the way like them, no? Lahi ang imong agyanan sa ilahang agyanan, but still pareho ra mo og maabtan. Ayan. So, thank you so much for watching this video and I hope you've learned a lot. And to my students in understanding the self subject, get ready for our quiz and submission of your modules. Thank you so much. God bless.